Hi everyone, welcome. Considering that the main topic in my videos is worms, or pink little friends, it is fitting that I use pink tablecloth and pink plastic to cover up with. So you can imagine my delight when I was walking through a park recently and saw this pink tub amongst some debris cast off into the bushes. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not like a habitual trash picker, but the tub looked like a useful tub, much like my other tubs, except most of mine are either black or gray. This is my first pink tub. I've even got a small green one. I figured, hey, I'll bring this thing home, clean it out, and it'll be useful. So it's the system, not a system, because I've never run a system in it, but it is the container that I've been using to prep bedding in, and the bedding that's been placed in there most recently is in preparation for relocating some worms. So I believe that today is the day we're going to combine some of this lovely prepared bedding with this assortment of delicious foods that you see here, which includes mango and an extra mango seed where the seeds have been cut in half. And look at all that delicious mango too. And here's another mango seed cut in half. There's onion, there's citrus, orange or tangerine or whatever. There's even a couple full cucumbers in here. So it's quite a treat for the African nightcrawlers who've been migrating now for 3 weeks. After 2 weeks had gone by of this migration, we checked in on it, and that was a week ago. So the migration is now 3 weeks in progress, and I've kept to the whole idea of coming in here every 2 days and aerating the systems to try to help the material that the worms inhabit become drier and drier. And even during the last check-in, we added a little bit of extra food to the horizontal migration feeding zones to keep them coming on over. And I do believe it's time to do the haul out, harvest the vermicompost, and give it our little friends a new home in those black tubs right there. So I'm going to get to work on building the tubs, and then we can get to hauling the worms out. Let's get to work. Alright, well, now that our bins are built and all ready to have worms occupying them, we got to get the worms. So I've got my haul out containers here, and I've got the systems up here on the bench. But before we get started, let me just share a little bit of info about the systems with you. So their age at this point, 386 days of age. And yep, you did the math right. It was 3 weeks ago on day 365 when the systems hit 1 year of age, when we decided to initiate the migration. And well over 21 days since I've been coming in here every other day to aerate. That also translates mathematically into 10 aerations to help this system kick off its moisture and make it perhaps a little less inhabitable or comfortable for the worms to want to stay in, and possibly get them on the lookout for a better place to be. So just before we put this aside, you could see how the 386 days breaks out into 257 days of composting with bedding, 108 days due to high moisture, took a long time, foraging without bedding, and now the past 21 days of migration. And 31 feedings to me really means 29 feedings. Food and bedding from 29 feedings created this harvest of vermicompost. And well, those last 2 feedings were more meant to drive the migration of the worms. And when I do the haul out, that entire migration zone comes out. That includes any vermicompost created by the worms consuming that food that was used to build it. So in a way, I don't treat those last couple feedings as the inputs into this particular harvest. So before we remove the worms, I think it's always best to sort of isolate what I'm harvesting from what I'm hauling out. So at this point I'm kind of going right for the middle here and randomly checking the material to confirm that no rogue worms are still occupying it. I was pretty disruptive during the last aeration, which was just yesterday, and it felt to me like I had moved a number of worms further in this direction inadvertently. So I just was curious to see if they stuck around, or perhaps they reacted as I was expecting to them being placed into this dry stuff. My guess is that they reacted by hightailing it in search of something more hospitable. Well, here too we could take some of this stuff off the top surface, pretty dry stuff. Fair to assume that this is going to be relatively worm-free too. So once again I'm gonna, oh okay, I think we just found a sort of a cutoff point here. So let's just use this edge to see if we could pull vermicompost over to be part of the harvest. Leave behind any shreds of paper and cardboard and stuff that I would just consider as contamination in the lovely vermicompost. And it wasn't really my intention to just abandon this material, or not so much abandon it, but go full bore into treating it as a batch of harvested castings. A lot of times I'll include a little extra step just to see if we can provide the straggler worms that might still have remained in this harvested batch of vermicompost. Kind of try to round them up, see if we can get them together using a bait box. And my idea was to do something along those lines with this stuff. So over here in bin number 1, we're just going to treat everything over here on this side as what gets hauled out. Gosh, I sure hope we've got containers large enough to hold all that. It's going to be heaping and it's going to be a little precarious. We'll have to be careful. Let's do the same thing in bin number 2. So I don't remember if one system perhaps or the other was more showing signs of worms venturing out of the horizontal migration feeding zone. And I think it was here in bin number 1 I found this big ball of worms huddled together in a okay, let's treat that as sort of the cutoff already right there. Kind of huddled together in a way that I sometimes see worms doing when they're in sort of a distress mode. Perhaps the material that they're inhabiting is problematic for them somehow. Perhaps some sort of imbalance of the pH or who knows what. Sometimes when the worms start to feel that they're in danger, that's when you start sometimes seeing them huddling together, sort of a safety in numbers response, I suspect. And that was one of the other reasons I thought that it was high time to get this haul out done, just in case there was something going on that the worms were not agreeing with in here. So I figured, you know, let's not wait any longer. Every day I've come in here, or every other day I've come in here to do these aerations, I've observed how the material is becoming less and less populated with worms. So I don't think we're jumping the gun. I definitely think the vermicompost has been, for the most part, voluntarily depopulated by our wormy friends and is ready to be considered as harvestable. Let's proceed. I'm going to be very curious to see how much space this material requires, and you know, this feels like it's gonna run the risk of causing issues. So our remains of the horizontal migration feeding zone partition, I guess, can get put in here ahead of time so that it doesn't end up causing issues. And well, when it comes time to launch systems number 1 and 2 in the black tubs, I'm pretty much going to keep to launching these worms in bin number 1 of the old system into the new number 1 system. So this will be an excellent opportunity for us to get a little glimpse into how many worms we're talking about here. And it's at this time I'll typically try my best to move the material about a little bit here and there to give us a little bit better view into what's going on. And I'm definitely starting to feel like I may have shortchanged myself here a little bit on space. Now that last handful, I don't know, seemed like there was a lot of bedding in there. Perhaps not so many wormies. And well, here too. Stuff out here on the surface definitely has worms throughout it. Don't get me wrong. But perhaps not as much as some of those other handfuls that really brought with it a bunch of stuff. And you know, I do believe that at some point I'll probably even screen this material just to further refine it and to exclude other bits of debris that are just going to end up in here anyway, regardless of how hard I try to keep it clean. So I don't really have to go crazy, pick and clean all the little bits of leftover shredded paper cardboard that have remained here in this stuff. We'll just deal with it later and screen it out later. So now this container, slightly larger, should be a little bit less awkward removing it. Removing the contents of the horizontal migration feeding zone and placing it into this slightly deeper tub. And it did feel to me like when I removed this little partition, it felt to me like bits and pieces of it might have stayed behind within the horizontal migration feeding zone, so we'll probably bump into that as we get there. So let's see, that's a nice big handful. I guess it's kind of nice to bring over a whole bunch at once, but it also limits our view of how much is in there as far as worms go, and it's a little bit difficult to see since they very closely resemble the bedding with which the stuff is created. And I'll tell you, for 3 weeks, the amount of castings they've created in this is incredible, and it's so nice and loose and free-flowing. Really lovely material. I'm already starting to get this little sense of how many worms I believe we're talking about here, so that when it comes time to estimate what the worm count was in the new buckets number 1 and 2, what I see here is going to be only part of the input into my consideration, because naturally there's going to also be that opportunity we have to see them again when it comes time to release them into their new home. So I believe there's not much reason to hold back on doing exactly that next. What we have here, all this harvested material, I believe I'm just going to combine it into a single bin, set up a bait box at some point, doesn't even have to be today, and then I'll be working on rounding up stragglers in here. That's my plan, but that's going to happen later, off camera. Next thing to happen is getting the new systems out here and releasing our wormies into their new home. Let's get started with that now. Here we are. It's time to release the African nightcrawlers that we hauled out of system number 1 and system number 2, going into the new black tubs, similarly going to be numbered 1 and 2. And as you can see, some of the foods that we put in there are peeking out through the bedding here and there. Even through the bedding at the corner, I could see a little puddle So I must have added a little bit more moisture than is necessary. You know what? I'm not going to sweat it. I got a feeling the worms are going to enjoy it. So why don't we get to work on releasing these little guys now. Let me just remind you, I am looking forward to hearing from all of you with your estimates on how many worms got released here into system number 1 and into system number 2. So please, after you've had the second chance now to check them out, first at the haul out and now during the release, ooh, look at that. Please submit your estimates for how many worms you believe we're releasing into these systems today, and as always, I'll take the info and average it, come up with the estimated worm count for each system. All right, very, very nice. Let's see if we can jostle things loose a little bit here and help these little guys get situated in their new home. Awesome. If you ask me, I think we've created quite a nice environment for these little guys, and well, hopefully they're happy. I'm glad to have a nice thick layer of familiar material for them to be brought in here with, so that they can stay in that for as long as they feel comfortable, and then eventually hopefully they'll want to start roaming around and going in pursuit of the yummy foods or the plentitude of moisture in there. So hopefully we've created an environment that they enjoy. So as a top covering, I was going to put on a sheet of paper, and a lot of times at this point I would be covering up with plastic to try to keep moisture in, but I think just based on how heavy these systems are and how much water I poured in and how damp the material was when I was using it anyway to set it up, I think we'll be okay. If we at some point realize that perhaps we're losing moisture too quickly due to no plastic covers, we can always change that, but I think we're going to try with cardboard coverings. Cardboard and paper, which I think is going to do a fine job keeping the moisture in these systems. And well, that gets us pretty close to the finish line, well, with the exception of one last thing, and I think a lot of you know what that is. Yep, you guessed it. It's customary in my systems to have a label affixed on launch day, with which we officially christen them as official worm bins in my wormery. So please join me in welcoming African nightcrawler worm bins, and this is the CWL, Crazy Worm Lady variation of the African nightcrawlers. So please join me in welcoming African nightcrawler worm bins 1 and 2. And before you go, really quick, don't forget, leave a quick comment. How many worms do you think we just launched into these systems? I really look forward to hearing from you. So that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.